This podcast discusses themes of mental health, which some people may find emotive, such as suicide or other adult-themed content. The information contained in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. All views expressed are solely those of individuals involved and do not represent the opinions of any entity whatsoever with which we have been, are now, or will be affiliated. The information is not meant to diagnose or treat any mental health condition. If you're experiencing mental health symptoms, we encourage you to contact a mental health service within your community. If you're experiencing a mental health emergency, please seek the relevant support and interventions by presenting to your local accident and emergency department or contacting the relevant emergency services.
You're listening to the Men's Mental Health Podcast, The Man Hug.
Welcome to The Man Hug, the monthly men's mental health podcast. I'm Dean McShane.
I'm Dan Cooper.
I'm Ian Pearce-Hayes.
And I'm Conleth Kelly.
Each month we will discuss a different topic related to men's mental health, which will include a guest speaker who will discuss their own personal story. And each month we will also be showcasing an organisation or charity within the Merseyside area who work within mental health to help build your signposting skills. Welcome to this month's Man Hug. Once again, we are joined by two more amazing guests, and for this episode, we will be focusing on the theme of awareness. We will shortly be joined by Chris Sibley from the OLLIE Foundation, and a little later, we've got Jess Gallier, who will be with us to talk all about the Martin Gallier Projact. Our Ian is doing some roving reporting today. He's at the Suicide Prevention Summit in Newcastle, so we'll hear from Ian a little bit later on as well. So our first guest has travelled all the way from Hertfordshire and is one of the co-founders of the OLLIE Foundation, which stands for One Life Lost Is Enough. Chris, thank you for coming and joining us on the Man Hug.
That's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me up.
That's amazing. Well, me and Dan originally met you at the Nursing Live event last year. I think we both went away saying how much we were bowled away by your enthusiasm and your passion, and we were like, we need to get this man onto the podcast. So honestly, thanks so much for coming on. So just to start us off, just tell us a little bit about yourself then.
Okay, so I've got no ologies. That's the first thing, because a lot of people, if they think you want to try and help someone, they instantly think you've got to have an ology. I haven't. My background's shop fitting. Yeah. So 35 years as a project manager looking after shop fitting contracts. Spent a lot of time on Merseyside actually working with petrol filling stations for Gulf Oil. Did that for 30 odd years. Kind of career you don't choose to do, you fall into it. And then back in 2014 was when my son Taylor took his own life. And whilst I stayed working in that industry, through SOBS, the bereavement support group, I met the two other founders who'd also lost sons to suicide. And we just decided we couldn't go on trying to live our lives as we had before, because that wouldn't be possible. We wanted to make a difference. We had no idea what that meant. So, Stuart's got his own HR business, Jane's a nurse, I was working in shop fitting. But after a few meetings, we decided to start a charity. But at the time, it was to deliver one training session, which is ASSIST, Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training, which we did. We raised some money, got two counsellors trained to deliver ASSIST, and then delivered it for free. So that was the start. But I stayed in that career, still obviously working for OLLIE voluntarily, until November 2023, when I left the career and started working for OLLIE full time, which is how I ended up being at Nursing Live to meet you guys and everything else.
Oh, amazing. I mean, it's such a change, isn't it, from your profession to going into this, but, it's amazing that you do it, because it's people like yourselves that help so many people, especially around raising awareness. And most of the guests that we've had on have all had these life-changing moments, and that's where they've then ended up creating their own charities and organisations. So let's just start off with Taylor then. Just tell us all about your amazing son.
So you used a good word there, because if people ask me what was he like, I say magnificent. Yeah. So he was actually born 13 weeks prem, and nobody thought he'd survive, because as you know, you're born that early, nothing's really developed. So he was in incubator for 4 months in NICU. And then he was sent home, and at the time, he was the first child to be sent home in our county with all the oxygen tanks and everything. So the fire service came round to do assessment, all of that. But then through life he was okay, but the fallout from him being born so early, he had really mild cerebral palsy. If you'd met him, you wouldn't have known, but it meant one of his legs was slightly shorter and his foot was twisted. So when he was about 14, they broke his foot, reset it and straightened it. Now, he was one of those lads, and I guess all parents would say this, right? But he really was one of the kindest lads you could want to meet. Never lost his temper, and a lot of things I found out after he died, actually, from his friends, that he was always the person they'd go to, because he always wanted to put a smile on their face, because he was always joking and cheerful. Now, I didn't know any of that until afterwards. I also learnt after he died that on the last day of school, he stood up in front of the whole school and gave a massive talk about how much he loved school and he was going to miss everybody. So I learnt that afterwards. So he was great. He was fantastic. And there were with the knowledge I had at the time, there were no obvious signs that he was struggling. Now, we all know quite often there are no signs whatsoever. With the knowledge I've gained since, I can look back at 2 or 3 things and identify them as, but that wasn't teenage behaviour. But I didn't know back then. So that was TJ. He'd only been out of school. Taylor James, so TJ was his nickname. The shortest name in history, actually, because it got shortened to T. Do you know what it was? So a 1-letter name he ended up with. But
it was up in Liverpool, bit.
Exactly. So, so he left school. He'd only been out of school a couple of weeks and was all set to go to college, and then took his own life completely out of the blue.
Wow, okay. So what was that sort of like for you as a family? Was this the first time you've experienced anything like this?
Well, yes, to the extent that it obviously had a major impact, but suicide had touched my life before, but when I was much younger. Right. A teacher when I was at school I was about 13 at the time, and I remember the fact he took his life, but back then it wasn't. I'm 57 now, so that's a long time ago. Nobody talked about it. The school didn't talk about it. He was there one day and then he wasn't. And then a bit later in my 20s, somebody they knew took their own life, but whilst it was awful, it wasn't close enough to me to resonate. If you see what I mean. And until my son died, I hadn't actually remembered those 2 other experiences of death by suicide because they didn't resonate. And I had no knowledge of mental health other than every average man in the street. And then all of a sudden you're thrown into that world and you can't believe you didn't know the stuff that you learn.
Yeah. So you got some support from SOBS.
And this is where amazing people, we all know you have incredible guests on. They're all doing everything they can to help people. They might be people in the public eye. They might be somebody who's been bereaved and is doing something to make a difference. And so I've lost my thread there. It's my ADHD. What was that question again?
So just about your experience with SOBS.
SOBS. There's a really important story to that.
Brilliant.
So thanks for that. That happens with my ADHD sometimes, so apologies. Right, so on the day my son actually died, the police gave me the news, but I knew I had to get in my car and drive to a hospital. So I didn't break down like you might imagine. I was exactly the same as I am talking to you. Self-preservation, I guess. So my brain has shut down the emotional part. And I got to the hospital and it was the early hours in the morning and it was all shut apart from A&E. And I sat in A&E and the sister came and sat next to me and I was waiting for the mortuary to open and she knew what was going on. And she stuck a card in my top pocket. Now, this is only 5 hours after I've been told my son's died. And she kept saying to me, she understood what I was going through. And I kept saying, sorry, you don't actually know what I'm going through. But not in an aggressive or nasty way. It was just a conversation. And anyway, I then went to the mortuary and did that part. But 2 weeks later, I went back to the hospital to take this sister a bunch of flowers because she'd been phenomenal. And she wasn't in that day, but her colleagues were, and her colleagues said she did know what you were going through because her son died by suicide. Now, I hadn't thought about the card she'd put in my pocket, but that her colleague said, she gave you a card, you might find it useful. So when I got home, I took the card out and it was SOBS. So she, on the very day my son died, she'd given me that SOBS card. Now, I spent 6 months not going to SOBS, living in my own head, sure nobody else would understand it, full of rage, not at anyone in particular, at the world that my son was dead, which I put into the gym, just training. That was the thing to try and control this anger. And because there was a delay with the coroner's inquest, the date came through and it was on exactly the same day as a SOBS meeting, which are held monthly. And I actually thought, right, I can't keep living in my own head. 6 months of this, I'm not in a good place. So I'll go to the inquest, and then I'll go to my first SOBS meeting. And so that's how it happened. Literally 6 months to the day was my first SOBS meeting.
Amazing. And that's so interesting to hear, because I think for a lot of men who've come on to the podcast, it's usually a wife or a daughter who said, you need to go and get some help now, but it sounds like you've just done that on your own.
I did, because I wasn't with my son's mum. So we saw each other, but we lived separately. So I was actually on my own.
Yeah.
And at the time, work's great, but in hindsight, they've said this to me because I'm friends with my old bosses. We didn't know what to do. So actually what they said was, stay off as long as you want, or come in if you want, just do what you want, which was what I needed at the time. But they've admitted since we didn't have a clue. So I was off for a few weeks, living in my own head, and then thought, I can't stay in the house. So I went back into the workplace, but I wasn't at work, if you know what I mean. And then I just got to a point. I was so angry. Yeah. And I can't. You know what? If you're angry, you cannot live constantly. One, it's draining. It's not good for you personally. So that's what kind of made me think, let's go to SOBS. I'll see what it's like. Thinking I don't really want to sit in a group of people, but then instantly realise within 10 minutes I'm in a room where we've got different journeys, but everybody gets it. So all of these thoughts and feelings I've had, so have everybody else in the room. Yeah. And I suddenly realised I wasn't alone.
Wow, that's really powerful, isn't it? Because I think, again, it's something that we touch on a lot, that the power of shared lived experience. So everyone's experience is going to be so different, but, you just said there, you realise you're not the only person that's going through it, and that can be really, an amazing part of helping you to process things.
Absolutely.
Is that what you found with SOBS?
Exactly what it did. Yeah. Things that... I'm trying to think of an example now, it's quite tricky, but there'd be thoughts I'd be having and thinking, nobody else will feel like this, it's only me. And then I'd listen to other people talking and thinking, well, that's me, and that's me. Because for the first couple of sessions, I didn't say anything, I just listened. And the people who would talk, I'd think, well, that's me. But then the other thing that happened, there were people there who'd been there for 10 years, but they seemed to have it together. They seemed to be in a place, I'd look at them 6 or 7 months after my son died and think, how on earth are you as together as you are? And I just wanted to be them. But I had to learn that the only way to get there is to live those 10 years and to go through your grief journey. You can't fast forward to get to that point. And often that happens to me now, because it was 2014 TJ died. When I now talk, people talk to me and say, how have you got to this place? I said, I had to live the years that have just passed. I couldn't fast forward to it because they're a year into their journey. They're desperate to get to that place. Yeah,
of course. Yeah, so then from this SOBS meeting, you then met some like-minded people and thought about starting up your own support?
So Jane and Stuart. Stuart was there because his son Morgan took his own life when he was 15.
Right.
And Jane's son Chris was 19. And we'd met at SOBS, and obviously not everybody could do this, but we were just determined that we had to make a difference somehow. I had no clue what that meant. We just had to make a difference. And after a couple of meetings in the best place to have a meeting, over a beer in a pub garden, we chatted about what we could do and decided at that point we wanted to deliver assist training for free in the county of Hertfordshire, which is where we lived. So at that time, we then looked for qualified assist trainers, bearing in mind this is 2015. There weren't any in Hertfordshire at the time. We spread our net further afield, and we found one in Manchester and one from Cornwall. So we utilised those two trainers to start with and provided training for free. But at the same time, we went on a fundraising mission to raise enough money to pay for 2 counsellors to be trained to deliver assist, which we then delivered for free. Wow. So that was how it started.
Amazing.
Since then, what we offer has grown exponentially.
Yeah. So that leads on to tell us about the OLLIE Foundation. What is it that you guys are doing?
Okay, so now, and there's always so much, to nutshell it, it's quite small. It's a massive spectrum of workshops, sessions, panel events, all under that massive umbrella of emotional wellbeing and suicide prevention. But I'll pick some off, if you like, as a pendulum. At 0, we have a mini curriculum for primary school children called Planting the Seed, which is all about nurturing where they grow plants. They grow sunflowers, and it's all about nurturing plants to grow tall and strong, reflected back on them as young people. Now, it makes me feel quite sad because of my age. When I was at primary school, you were just kids at primary school. And the fact we actually need to do that now, but it's good that we do, and the children love it and the teachers love it. So we have this mini curriculum. There are sessions or trainings that we can offer that lots of organisations do. So you can get assist from lots of places. We can teach you to be assist trained, mental health first aiders, but you can get that from lots of places. What we're also able to do, because of the team, we have medical experience, academic and lived experience, we create our own sessions. So, for example, one called Keeping Safe and Carrying On, which is specifically about anxiety. But rather than just telling people this is what you do if you feel anxious, we take them through what's going on chemically and biologically in the body so they understand why they feel anxious, and then give them the techniques to help stop them feeling anxious or intervening with panic attacks. We have a session called Talk Safe. Now that came about because lots of people were contacting us. The question we all get asked, what's the sign? And if only there was one sign, that would be easy enough, and there are no signs. But they'd ask us questions about how could they talk to somebody who was struggling. So we created Talk Safe, which is exactly that. It's for people who are worried about somebody else but think they could say the wrong thing, don't know what to say, they haven't got an ology, so how can they help? All of those things. And if there are signs, which as we know often there aren't, but in Talk Safe it shows you things that can be signs when there are signs. Now, whenever I'm talking anyway, I have a slide at the end that says, don't be like me, don't be oblivious. And what I mean by that is specifically links to Talk Safe. What Talk Safe has taught me, there are things that I put down to teenage behaviour with Taylor. With the knowledge I've got now, I'd have a very different conversation because I'd be aware they're not teenage behaviour. So I always urge people, just access it. Because you can do it online with us. We can do face-to-face, but it's all accessible online. And for anyone who needs it to be, all of our sessions online have free tickets because we had to make everything accessible to everybody. Keep moving through that pendulum. There's even online Pilates and guided art sessions for people for mindfulness. And the Zen Tangle, the guided arts, has become a bit of a community. People who are isolated, lonely. We have a neurodivergent couple who are autistic, and they always give us great feedback. And they actually say it's the only thing as a married couple they're able to do together each week. Because it's their thing. So we try to cover a vast array. There's lots more in. There's transitions workshops, which was primarily about transitioning from school to uni. When that invisible safety blanket disappears, you didn't know there was a safety blanket when you were at school, but there was one. And when you're at uni, there is no safety blanket. And then right at the end, if like 0 to 100, is our prescription safe plan initiative. Now, again, I'm not saying we was like superhuman and suddenly thought, what's happening? What actually happened during lockdown, we started to get contact from parents of young people at universities, because everyone's in lockdown, who'd been prescribed a medication, but very shortly afterwards had made an attempt on their own life. And we started to get more and more of these calls during lockdown, because I do know there was, I think, a 2.5 million increase in the use of antidepressants during lockdown. So a lot of people were struggling. And we started to get more and more of these calls, made us really curious. And then we had a similar call, but in this instance, tragically, the young man died within 6 days of starting this medication. So we started to look into this, and sure enough, if you look at the literature, at the time we were focused on antidepressants, you could get the literature and see that potential 1 in 200 possible chance of suicide ideation. So we started working on a safe plan, which was really simple to use, but would keep people fully informed and aware of all the possible side effects so they can make an informed choice to start, but also when they're on it, if they start having severe headaches, they don't think, oh no, there's something wrong with me. They're aware it's a possible side effect, so they can actually lean back into it. We then worked with some GPs and pharmacists locally to make sure everything was in line with NICE guidelines, and it actually ended up going way past what NICE does. But very simply, it highlights to somebody, if I prescribed you some medication and took you through the safe plan, there's pretty much 3 questions. But one of them states that there is potential that this medication could give you suicidal thoughts. It's not, you might feel worse before you feel, all of the other things that we've heard. So it very clearly tells them that. But then it also tells them very clearly what to do if they experience them, which is always go for a med review. Now, since we started that, when we first spoke actually last year, so we've been working on that since COVID, And to be honest, at the start, lots of people said, oh, you're just anti-medication. No, we're not. We're the exact opposite. Medication is vital to many, many people, but so is the informed, safe use of that medication to keep you or your loved ones safe. So we carried on working on it. To our amazement, or my amazement as just a guy from shop fitting, to then discover other medications that have a known side effect that they can cause suicide ideation. Montelukast for asthma, Accutane for adult acne, finasteride for male pattern baldness, even doxycycline, which has been around since the 60s, is now being linked to things. And as I was saying earlier, last week I got sent a little excerpt of an epilepsy medication where it says about that. Now, just from kind of straw polls when I'm talking at events, when people hear me talk about prescription safe plan, and I'll give you an example with no names. Last week at an event, chatting around a table, a guy came up to me afterwards and said, last night when we went to bed, my wife said she didn't want to be here anymore. And she's never struggled with her mental health particularly. But he said, having heard you speak, she was put on this medication 9 days ago. So I said, right, what you need to do is go back to the doctor, get a med review. And I fast forward, they literally did it immediately. We're back in within 2 days, changed the medication. Within 2 days of her stopping that medication, he messaged me and said she's absolutely fine now. But again, it was just, he happened to be round the table while we were chatting about it. And the hardest thing is getting the message out there to people. But since we initially spoke, that our prescription safe plan in Hertfordshire has been commissioned by Public Health. Brilliant. So it's now part of a service called the befriending service, where if somebody is struggling with their mental health and is discharged from anywhere on medication that has that risk, another charity, which is Mind in Mid Hearts, provides them a buddy, but they're taken through the prescription safe plan. And that was literally rolled out about 2 months ago. Wow. And now we're just trying to share that, because it's, if anybody wants it, it's freely downloadable from the website. You can download the safe plan for free. It's in the 16 most commonly spoken languages in the country, and it's all free. Wow.
This is the thing I was most blown away when we first met, because it's something that has been a problem for decades. And as you say, it's not about anti-medication. I think a lot of it comes down to maybe lack of education of, in particular, GPs will be the first to say they don't get a huge amount of mental health training in the first place. Yet, as you say, the prescriptions of antidepressants goes up year on year. And it's, what do we actually do when someone is first prescribed that? Do we spend the time to sit down and go through them, all of the side effects? Yeah. And the answer is, is no, and they're just sent off with their prescription to go and pick it up from the chemist. I think this is such a valuable thing that you guys are doing, and especially within universities, like you mentioned before, we do see it a lot where maybe people get homesick, maybe they haven't been able to make friends like they thought they would. All of these sort of ideas of coming into this, it's going to be the best time of my life going to university. Yeah. And within however many weeks or months, they are prescribed things like antidepressants. And again, if you think about that vulnerability of someone living alone, the risks are horrendous, aren't they? So I think it's absolutely incredible, this piece of work.
Things, I'd say it for any medication now, though. Because you want to know what the side effects are, because otherwise if you start feeling something adverse afterwards, you don't know if it's the medication or you might just think you've got something else wrong.
But you can see the Swiss cheese effect, because GPs on average have around 10 minutes to review a patient. Yeah. So within that 10 minutes they've got to cram in the consultation, discussion around why the person's feeling that way, and they've got to make a clinical decision as based on, which direction do we go with this patient?
Absolutely. Medication
is an option, talking therapy is another. So there's a lot of pressure on that GP, and services like what you're offering are, such an invaluable thing to sort of help that system, because otherwise there is so much scope for that Swiss cheese effect of people who are vulnerable because of their age and because of the sensitivity to the drugs that are being prescribed, the bad things are going to happen. And so you can see the value in what you're doing.
Sorry, just linking in, because I think again it's a really important point. It's not just the side effects of suicidal ideation, is it? No. Even things that I worked with a lot of young males, and the medication they were prescribed to be, for example, weight gain.
Yes.
So with the weight gain, it comes then self-esteem issues, and it comes all kinds of things, and none of the time they're told about these risks as well. And it's so
you're right. And one that and it always seems to be young men that are particularly interested in this one, but one of the side effects is, of lots of medications, you can lose your sex drive.
Yeah, of course.
And particularly when I'm talking to young men, they're like, whoa, really? Now, again, as far as I understand it, until relatively recently, it was always believed when you stop the medication, if you had the side effects, they'd all go. But I read a couple of studies that were done last year saying that in some cases that isn't the case. You keep them forever. Well, that wouldn't mean you decide not to take a medication, but you'd absolutely want to know that before you started.
Definitely.
It's all about being informed, isn't it? And if, like in that case with the young man I mentioned, if he hadn't have happened to speak to me, it plays in my head. I think, what would have happened then? Yeah. They wouldn't have had any idea. His wife is feeling suicidal. He doesn't know it's anything to do with the medication. So that I don't know what would have happened, and thankfully it didn't. Yeah. But there must be many cases like that.
Well, I've lived that scenario.
Have you?
So my wife was put on metazapine last year.
Right.
And she was not herself on the Saturday, and we went out for a bite to eat, and she just stormed off, which was not like her. And me and my daughter were following, and I said to Megan, what's wrong with your mum? And then we got home, and I just asked her, I said, are you okay? And she goes, no, I don't feel right. I just wanted to throw myself in front of a car. And and as a healthcare professional, that I found that the fact that she wouldn't talk to me, I was like, oh my God. So obviously I knew what to do, so I called the crisis team, and they were unbelievable. And obviously we stopped taking the metazapine immediately, and as you said, within a couple of days she started to feel a lot better. And then she's re-established on another antidepressant which didn't have those obviously negative effects. So that one resonated.
There you go, first hand. And to your point on GPs though as well, again, I'm with you. So if you go to a GP, and during lockdown it was all on Zoom calls and phone calls, which is different again, and you don't tend to have any more family doctor. When I was a kid, you had the same doctor. He knew your medical history. Now you chop and change, so that's an issue as well. But if you're the GP and a young lad at uni has phoned you you're having a Zoom call, you've got 10 minutes, you want to help him. Right now, I don't know what it's like around here, but where we live, if that idea of help might be CAMS, who are fantastic, but overworked, under-resourced, 9-month waiting list, the GP's thinking, well, I ain't sending him to CAMS, I can do nothing, or what can I do? I can give him some medication because he wants to help. So, because that's what they're there for.
One key thing I found working in primary care and sometimes prescribing antidepressants, or when I review a patient with regards to their mental health, definitely if I'm prescribing antidepressants, I'll want to follow them up in 4 weeks just to make sure, and obviously give them the safety net advice with regards to the negative side effects. Unfortunately though, all too often they don't appear. They don't turn up for that 4-week review. And at that point then the antidepressants won't be reissued because it's not deemed safe, because we need to speak to them to let them know, to ask them the question, how have you felt? Are you feeling the benefit? And as we know, it takes a number of weeks for them to get into the system and start working effectively. So that's a big issue that I'm finding, to the point now where I'm looking at my practice and thinking, well, is there any point me inviting them back for a face-to-face appointment? Would it be more practical if I actually made sure that I put time aside to make phone calls to them and then try, a few times to contact them? And so again, it's trying to work within primary care the best way for patients to engage, because if they take the antidepressants for 4 weeks and then stop, well, that's not ideal, because they're just probably starting to work.
Exactly.
So it's such a difficult situation.
It is. And, there's a chap I know in Southern Ireland who has a mental health organisation. He delivers awareness training. He had his own suicide ideation and talks about this openly. And he was on medication. But at that time, whenever he went back, because he wasn't getting on with the medication, he said all that kept happening was my dose kept getting upped and upped and upped. And he did the thing which we know you're not supposed to do. But he decided, I just felt like a zombie. So he stopped all of his medication. He's okay now, but he says himself, I shouldn't have done that. But they just kept upping it and upping it and upping it, and I just turned into a walking husk. So there's so much, and it's so complex, all of it. And like I said, not having ologies and not being from the world, when I find out this new information, it literally blows my mind.
Yeah, exactly.
It just does.
Yeah. So as a father who's been bereaved by suicide, who's now doing so much active work, what's the sort of, the big thing that you wish people would grab hold of in terms of awareness? What's the main thing?
And this is really hard, because if you'd have asked me this before Taylor died, my answer would probably have been different. I just want people to get the knowledge that can change and save lives. And they can get that from us or lots of other brilliant organisations around the country. They can. Now, some people would do that anyway, and some people will be like I was before Taylor died. Oh yeah, that's interesting, but they won't go and do the session. So I'd love people to access the information that is available. But the other thing, and this is my pipe dream, we talked about this at Nursing Live. We've all got physical health. We can have good physical health, bad physical health, but we will have physical health. We go on holiday, we meet complete strangers. By the end of 2 weeks, they know everything about your bad knee, the scars on you. They know all of your physical stuff. But we've also all got mental health, which can be good, poor, or somewhere in the middle. But on that same holiday in Benidorm, the chances that you've spoken to those strangers about your mental health at all is probably zero. But they know everything about your physical health. So my long-term hope is that people openly talk about mental health in the same way they talk about physical health, because then that means we would have made some real strides.
That really resonated with me, and I talked that, and I think you as well. So we did some sessions in school, didn't we, back in the last year? And I was actually making a point of saying that, and I'd get on the whiteboard and I'd put the continuation, the continuum of physical health, and underneath the continuum of mental health, and saying these interlink, these need to be looked at throughout your entire life in the same way and talked about in the same way. So that really resonated. And now when I'm seeing patients as well, I talk about that, and that equilibrium of both.
It needs to, doesn't it? Because until we get to that point, there is still all the things we know, the stigma. People won't reach out, as we know, particularly men, for lots of reasons. Embarrassed, don't think anyone will understand the associated stigma. So we need to get it to a place where that isn't there. And to be honest, I'm 57. If I'm realistic, do I think that'll happen in my lifetime? I hope so, but probably not. But we're making strides towards it. So
we've been into quite a lot of schools recently. We've been blown away, haven't we? By what's going on with a lot of young people. It's great, and hopefully there will come a point where people are sort of clued up about how to look after their friends and their family, and look out and just not be scared to have that conversation. That's all that we want, really. And we keep using that stigma word, but I just replace it with ignorance, because I think there's so many people that just don't want to learn about it until it's happened to them or a family member. And I think if people can just educate themselves, hopefully they may never need to interact with concerns of someone who may be suicidal, but if they do, they'll then know what to do and have that conversation. So back to the OLLIE Foundation, what sort of events have you got coming up? Because I know you're always so busy, you've got lots going on.
There's, again, because we're, I think like a lot of grassroots, because we're such a small team, we don't tend to arrange our own events, but people arrange events which we then support. Which is great, and that obviously raises funds, because as we know, biggest challenge for all grassroots charities is funding. Demands on services are treble. That's every single grassroots charity. So actually, there's an organisation in Leeds who later this year are doing a dragon boat race to raise money. And again, it's just about being, and I'd say this to anybody else who works for a charity or runs a charity, if you don't do this, ask anybody for anything. And what I mean by that is Pub in the Park, which is a Tom Kerridge event that travels around the country. I just wrote to them to say, look, can we have a free awareness stand at your Pub in the Park event, which is because they do them around the country. This one's in Hertfordshire. And they came straight back and said, yes. Fantastic. So we had an awareness stand for the 3 days. During that time, the amount of people from the NHS or first responder services like police and schools who came to us, and we were then able to actually assist. So we've got that again this year. Amazing. Because again, that's more about, it's not about raising funds, that's about spreading awareness as much as possible. So, and I say it slightly flippantly, but it isn't meant flippantly. I will go to the opening of a crisp packet because if there's a chance to help one person and share the knowledge, it's worth doing, isn't it? Definitely. So I literally will. I'll go to the opening of a crisp packet.
Brilliant. I noticed as well as there's ways that people can get involved in the OLLIE Foundation, whether as advisors, volunteers, or fundraisers as well. So
absolutely. We're always looking for volunteers. As is everybody. So we're always after volunteers, because we don't arrange our own events. The need for them is sporadic, but when there's a lot of need, there's a lot of need, because the events all seem to happen during the summer. Now, again, doesn't help on Merseyside, but in Hertfordshire we also have a community garden where we do lots of different groups, from gardening groups where people literally grow and gather stuff, but young offenders, vets group, LGBTQ plus group, and it's I've made it sound grander than it is. It's a garden in the middle of a big allotment with a work shed and stuff like that. So people can come along to there just to drink coffee. Just to chat, just to do what they want. Amazing. So we try and offer as much as possible. And to be honest, any help is gratefully received. Whether even if that's somebody who says, I could come to an event with you and help you build your stand. It's still helpful. So anything helps.
That's great. And we often have a lot of people who are listening who maybe got a fun run or a marathon planned as well. So fundraisers is so valuable for places like yourself, isn't it?
Absolutely. And if you heard me do any of my like keynote talks anywhere, much to most people's astonishment, because we're a charity that rely on donations, so do lots of other grassroots charities, and I meet loads of other grassroots charities doing fantastic stuff. And as you guys know, because I mentioned it, tomorrow I'm seeing Alison from Alfie Squad and Debbie from Sean's place doing fantastic stuff, right? So I'll often say to people, look, if you want to support the OLLIE Foundation, that's fantastic. But if there's a charity that's close to your heart, a grassroots charity in your area, look to support that. They will really need your money, and they really make a difference in your local community. Yeah,
it's really good advice.
Yeah, because it's true, isn't it? It's true. The national charities are fantastic, in my mind, for making governments change paths, for strategies and planning. But if something happens in your town that needs a really quick reaction, it's the grassroots charities that can turn on a sixpence and do it. So I say to anybody, if you're looking to support a charity, whether it's £5 a month or whatever, find one that's close to your heart, and if you can, support them.
That's the best advice we've had for a long time. I love that. It's so true, isn't it? It's amazing. So how can people follow the OLLIE Foundation? Okay,
so our website is www.theolliefoundation.org. That will give you access to the website, where there's so much information on there, lots of freely downloadable content, access to all the training sessions that run online on our open session calendar. That rotates all year, constantly, with new sessions going on, and there's always fully funded tickets on there for anyone who needs them to be. We also have a YouTube channel, and whilst they're not specifically linked to suicide prevention, they could be. And what I mean by that, we put on their webinars, so previously recorded webinars that we've done. And as an example, and this shows how old I am, we had a webinar recently called Behind Closed Doors, Child on Parent Violence. And all I knew that the two guests we had on were David and Carrie Grant. And great, fine. So we made some tickets available, and 1,000 tickets went in 24 hours. It was like, what? And so anyway, I've joined the call. Then I suddenly realised who David and Carrie Grant were. They do things on the telly, dancers and singers. But they then told their story. They have 4 children. The eldest is adopted. All 4 are autistic. And with all 4 of them, they've experienced extreme child-on-parent violence, to the extent there was an incident which they talk about at the school where the police helicopter was flown in. And local parents filled in a petition to try and get their children kicked out of the school. And I sat listening to them on this webinar thinking, that is horrific. Right? And David Grant leant into the camera and said, I can't believe what you do. And I said, but I've just listened to what you've endured with all through your life, and it's unbelievable. So our YouTube channel has webinars on very specific topics that can really help people if they're struggling with certain things. So it's always worth looking at that as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think for educational purposes, I'm just thinking for, obviously we're quite big on pushing mental health agenda with nursing students, social work, paramedic, and I think these are such valuable educational resources that we'll be really keen to share.
And sharing's the thing, isn't it? Because as again we said earlier, the hardest thing for us, as it is for every other grassroots charity, is making people aware of the support that is there for them. Because people just don't know, and it's not until they kind of need a resource then they jump into the charity postcode lottery, and if they're lucky there is support in the thing they need in their area, and if there isn't, then they've got to go and seek it. But I find that's the hardest, making people aware. So the more we can spread it, the
sometimes
better.
It's like the Cinderella service, like, it's in the ashes, and until you need it then it pops up, like, but it's always, it's when you need it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's that kind of thing.
Exactly that.
Amazing.
Because, a hub of hope,
Yeah.
Which
yes.
Hub of Hope, for example, I have every time I go somewhere, I've got Hub of Hope cards in my bag.
Brilliant.
And because it's the space we work in, I always assume everybody will have heard of the Hub of Hope, but no, they haven't. So it's like, I have a card. There you go. You can use it for this.
That's it. We promote it on every podcast because we just think it's
all about awareness.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. Social media. Can people follow OLLIE Foundation?
They can indeed. We're on the old person's Facebook, Instagram. We are on Twitter, but we don't actually do much on Twitter. But we're on Insta, Facebook, LinkedIn.
Brilliant.
So you can follow us on there.
Yeah.
And then personally, I'm on LinkedIn, so is our CEO, so that we're on there all the time. Could I mention something else, which you might have talked about before? Have you heard of an app called Ripple?
I don't think we've talked about that on here now.
Okay.
No.
So there's a lady called Alice Hendy, and I'm sure she'd speak to you.
Yeah.
Alice's brother, Josh, took his own life. Mm-hmm. Now, Alice, because of the job she used to do professionally, was able to look at all of his computer activity to see what he'd been researching in the lead up to his death. Yeah. And obviously it was all to do with suicide. Alice created this piece of software which is free to download to anybody called Ripple. And you can download it to your PC and it runs in the background. Obviously you don't know it's happening. Yeah. If somebody searches for something to do with suicide, it puts a holding page up with breathing techniques, gives them help numbers to phone. It won't let them search for the negative stuff. It's phenomenal. It's free. You can download it. Now, she already works with West Ham United. They're big supporters. But as a silly example, I went into my daughter's school because every child has to have a Chromebook and said, you need to download this, which they did. So it's on every child's Chromebook. So I'll put a shout out for that because it's a phenomenal piece of tech.
I love that. That's fantastic. So it's called Ripple.
It's
software?
Ripple, but it's Ripple PPLE.
PPLE.
Yeah, so Ripple, R PPLE, sorry, R PPLE. But it's great. So I just wanted to mention that because it's phenomenal.
That's fantastic. We'll certainly share about that as well. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. We can't speak highly enough of the work you guys do at OLLIE Foundation, and it's absolutely amazing, and hopefully people will take a lot from it and be able to access your resources and everything. But Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we massively appreciate it. Thank you so much.
It has been my pleasure. Thanks, guys. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you too, mate. So we're going to have a short break and then we should be hearing from our Ian in Newcastle.
You're listening to the Men's Mental Health Podcast, The Man Hug.
So I'm at the Suicide Prevention Conference in Newcastle, organised by If You Care, You Share, and I'm joined by Jake Mills, who is well known to the Man Hug, was our first guest that came to our anniversary and hopefully will be coming along in April. Jake, thanks for spending the time this morning. Can you, what's your thoughts on awareness in terms of suicide prevention in a context, obviously, for the conference? What are your thoughts and what's your message?
So, my thoughts are that everything is suicide prevention, and I think it's really important for us to think about it like that, because a lot of people can often think that suicide prevention means stopping somebody at the point of crisis. Whilst that is suicide prevention, suicide prevention can happen much earlier, and I think what a summit like today is doing is really highlighting the services, the tools, the things that are available that can be a lot more upstream to help intervention and prevention, which ultimately everything that we're doing, every time we talk about mental health, every time we talk about suicide, every time we talk about the Hub of Hope or any of these other things, that is suicide prevention. And so today's a really good example of just how much support is out there for suicide prevention.
Lovely. Thanks for that, Jake. Thank you. So I'm joined by Ellen O'Donoghue, who is from James's Place. She's the CEO. We're at the conference again on suicide prevention. So firstly, thank you, Ellen, to agree to speak a few words. Would you tell us a little bit about James's Place?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a pleasure to be at the conference today, and At James's Place, we offer a structured clinical intervention for men who are in suicidal crisis. So what we are there to do is to help a man to work through how he's come to be in that crisis, how he can get through it, and how he can stop it happening again. The service we offer is primarily for men whose crisis is motivated by life events. So we see lots of things like relationship problems, financial issues, job loss, debt, all the kinds of things that can happen to people in everyday life, but that can come to be a problem that men can't see their way out of, and that's exactly where we would step in. So we have centres in Liverpool, London and Newcastle, and men can be referred to us by professionals, but they can also self-refer and come directly to us. And we commit to seeing a man referred to us within 2 working days, so we don't hold a waiting list. And we're dealing with men who are really at very serious, immediate risk of ending their lives, so men who have an active plan to end their lives or have recently made an attempt. And when they come to us at James's Place, we will give them a structured, proven intervention. Everything we do is delivered by trained professional therapists, and we work with him over a course of about 4 to 5 weeks to really try to kind of dismantle that suicidal crisis and get him to a point where he can go on to live his life.
Thank you so much for explaining that. And I guess it's great. I guess it's also awareness of the need in terms of actually going from Liverpool, obviously then to Newcastle and London, as you said. In terms of the theme for today is really about suicide prevention and awareness of that. And you talked about the crisis point. Is that how you see awareness in terms of prevention, or is it a broader? What's the theme you picked out for today in terms of awareness of suicide prevention?
I would say that prevention is absolutely core to everything that we do at James's Place, but it's also about recognising the absolute range of opportunities there can be to intervene and help somebody, or to prevent them from getting to the point of needing a service like ours in the first place. One of our trustees is Professor Rory O'Connor, and he, in his really brilliant book, has a line that's always resonated with me very strongly about how every suicide is preventable, and preventable right up until the very last moment. And I think where James's Place fits in is kind of further along that line, is towards the point where somebody is in very immediate risk of ending their lives by suicide. But there's a whole range of other moments at which somebody could be helped. We can intervene at a much earlier age with children and young people, helping them to understand what it means to need help and what it means to feel suicidal. And that I think you're trying to reinforce that message all the time, that help is possible and that help is available, and to make sure then that we follow up and make sure that help is available, because I think it can be a very lonely and frightening place to know that you need help but not be able to find it.
That's lovely, and I love that quote. That's really quite very profound, isn't it? Just one last thing, you mentioned about that you often deal with in terms of that very crisis point for men. What things, and it was touched on earlier in terms of the conference today, would you say to a person at that very crisis point? Because I think that's the moment when people feel very, just not sure what to do. What would be your, advice in terms of people at that crisis point in their lives?
There's something really important, I think, about acknowledging the experience that they're having, and I think Jake Mills said it earlier as well, about acknowledging what they're experiencing and not being afraid to use some of that language about feeling suicidal, about feeling like they want to die, to end their lives. And then I think it's about making sure that you are ready to listen, that people feel that they're in a space where they will be heard. And I think another theme that's come up today is about trust, and that trust can take a long time to forge, and it can be broken very easily if somebody feels that they have tried to get help, they've sought help and haven't been heard or haven't been listened to. So I think that's a responsibility for all of us, and not just working in this area, but kind of as a wider society, to make sure that when somebody does that very brave thing of saying that they need help, that we can all make sure that that person is heard and that every possible effort is made to get them the help that they need.
Lovely. Thank you. Thanks very much, Alan, for your time. That's really appreciated. Thank you.
An absolute pleasure.
You're listening to the Men's Mental Health Podcast, The Man Hug.
OK, it's this part of the Man Hug that we shine a spotlight on a local service, charity or organisation. And this one we've wanted to get on for a while. So we're thrilled to be joined by Jess Gallier from the Martin Gallier Projact. Jess, welcome to the Man Hug.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely introduction. That was really kind. Have you been trying to get me for a while? Am I in high demand?
You've been on our list. We have a wanted list, you see, and you've been up there as the high one. So
thank you.
Before we dive into all of the amazing work being done at the project, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your role first.
Oh, okay. That's a funny one. So myself, who am I? My name is Jess. I'm the CEO and founder of the Martin Gallier Project. It sounds fancy, but it's not. It just means I do a little bit of everybody's jobs, and sometimes I have to spend hours on the phone to like energy suppliers and stuff like that. So it's not actually as glamorous as it sounds. I'm a mum. I've got 2 little boys. Well, I've got a little boy who's 8, and then I've got a stepson who is 14. And what else? Who am I? I don't know, I'm somebody, it sounds really silly, but I'm somebody that my passion is suicide prevention. And people say, like, do you not want to get a normal hobby, Jess? Like, do you not want to, like, do something a bit more upbeat, a bit of sport maybe? And I'm like, no, I wasn't built for sport. And I absolutely buzz off preventing suicide. It sounds really weird, doesn't it? But that's my thing. That's why I was put on this planet, I think.
Amazing. So tell us all about how the project started.
Okay, so... I, like a lot of people, thought that suicide was something that happened to other people, something that you see on the telly, something that happens in other people's lives. And it wasn't, unfortunately. It was something that happened in my life. It happened with my dad. I had 8 years ago now, so 2017. I just had a baby. Little Leo was 12 weeks old. And I'd love to say that we didn't see it coming. But we did see it coming a mile off. My dad was somebody that was very complex, had a lot of life stuff. None of it was actually mental illness. None of it was diagnosed mental illness. It was life stuff, and did for the majority of his life, in all honesty. And he was very honest with us. I was the eldest, so it was probably when I was about 13, I think, would always tell me that when his life became too much, he would end his own life. And I wish that we had been better educated at the time, or known what to do with something like that, maybe taken it more seriously, but you don't know what you don't know. So fast forward to 2017, I was 26 years old, I just had a baby, and I got that dreaded phone call to say that Dad had taken his own life. It was really weird. The morning that it happened, I woke up and I knew in my gut that something was about to happen today, and it was very, very bizarre. And obviously my world just completely crumbled. I went from being kind of top of the world, euphoric, just had a baby, happiest girl in the whole world, to literally like the depths of hell. Long story short, we had a year-long inquest. There were loads and loads of people involved in my dad's care. None of it was local, so I feel like I've got a bit more freedom to talk about it. But there were lots of people involved in my dad's care that perhaps could be doing things better. Now, none of this is about a blame game. None of it is about pointing fingers. But were there other ways to have done that piece of work with that person that presented in such a kind of erratic way, as many people do? We came out of the inquest a year later, and this little light bulb went on above my head. The inquest had been like a really horrible time for us as a family. You think that somebody dies by suicide, you go for an inquest, and then you move on with your life, and that's just, well, you never move on, you never get over it. But that coronial process was something that really did exacerbate a lot of that pain, made things a hell of a lot worse, and it meant that I didn't really start grieving until a year later when that was done. And in all honesty, my plans were to get through that inquest, represent my family, represent my dad, because there's no legal funding available. So it was us kind of representing Dad, and all these fancy services with barristers and silly hats and fancy bags, and then me, little like legally blonde me. It was, looking back, it was actually ridiculous. But my plan was to come out of that and end my own life, really. So I just desperately wanted to be with my dad after he died, and I don't think there's any shame in admitting that. But my plan was I had to see this inquest thing through. So I did. And then it got to that day when we saw it through, and the coroner changed her mind and ruled it as a suicide, which is what we'd been fighting for, because it was. And I changed my mind, and I thought, I'm not going to kill myself, actually. I've got something else to do now. I've got a piece of work that I think I've been put on this planet to do. And not many people know that, so I don't know why I'm sharing it today. It might be because the sun's out and I'm feeling open. But this light bulb went on above my head and I thought, can I do something with what we've been through? Yes, what we've been through is horrendous, but I feel like I've seen too much, I've learned too much, I've felt too much to walk away and let it go. And can I do something with all that information that if I end my own life, all that information goes, it dies with me, right? So can I do something with that could make a real difference in people's lives? And I started looking, and I mean, I'd done all this legal casework. I've not got a legal mind, by the way. I've got no legal expertise. But fake it till you make it. I'd done all this kind of casework. I was up all night, like highlighting things in case notes and stuff of where there were silly gaps in my dad's care that could have been different. So I then started to go down a rabbit hole and do loads of research into it, and I saw that people were dying for what I perceived to be silly reasons that actually a service within a community might be able to change, do better, do differently. And those were waiting lists, criteria, opening times, not involving the family, all of those kind of, to me at the time, I was like, these are silly reasons. These aren't good enough reasons for somebody to die. Can I do something with it? So I decided to design a service that took all of those problems and kind of did something with them. So we opened the Martin Gallier Projact in February 2019. And the idea was that it would be completely non-clinical, embedded on a high street, really embedded into the community, like proper part of the community. So we had the community come out and build it. We had no money. We had 64 pence in the bank account on the day that I signed the lease. And actually, it was the butcher at Edge & Sons Butchers that owns the building. And he phoned me on New Year's Day. He said, are you having this building, Jess, or not? And it was an old Citizens Advice building that had been sat there for years. It was minging, I'm not going to lie. And the deal was that we would do it up and the rent would be £63 a week for it. But we didn't have £63 a week in the bank account of this little CIC that we'd set up at the time. There was 64p left in there. And I flipped a coin and I said, hang on a minute, Callum, Uncle. Hang on a minute. I just put it on the side there and I flipped this 50 pence coin. And I went, yeah, go on then. Let's do it. And that's how the Martin Gallier Project was born. It's a bit silly, really. But, I mean, if it pays off, it wasn't silly, was it? So embedded in a community, had the community come out in force and paint it. Like I said, we had no money to do it up. And then the idea was that we would see people in a self-defined suicidal crisis. We'd completely demedicalise it. We had no money at the start to get staff, but we've got loads of staff now, which is great because it means that I don't do the job of 25 people. But at the start, it was a case of just doing it and building it and then going to funders and saying, this is what we've built, can you fund it? And we're very, very fortunate now to have some really good funders in place that fund those roles. So fast forward to now, 6 years in, we have suicide intervention workers, which is a term that I made up in my little head. I dreamt it up. You won't find it anywhere else, which is really annoying because we can't poach staff from anywhere else. Yeah. We have to literally train them from the ground up and take them with the expertise and the skills and the knowledge and the lived experience that they've got and then formalise that. But it does make our job a bit harder because we can't poach staff from another service. People might be pleased to know that. And so the suicide intervention workers will see somebody that is in a suicidal crisis. Without getting too technical, they'll hear it's very, very non-clinical. Feels like you're going into a living room, feels like you're chatting to a mate. They'll hear all of the reasons that person wants to die, and then they're super, super highly skilled and highly trained to pick up in that conversation any elements of hope, doubt or uncertainty. Those elements of hope, doubt or uncertainty, it could be, like we call it, a turning point. It could be a protective factor, it could be a person, it could be a thing, it could be a feeling. It could be something as simple as the person said, oh, I just wish there was another way. And you go, ha, got you. You've just said you wish there was another way. If I could give you another way, would you be interested? And then the suicide intervention worker introduces the third option. And this is where the magic happens in MGP. So your person with thoughts of suicide is thinking life, death, two big billboards looking at them. They're both huge. They're both very permanent and very they're just too big, aren't they? And at that moment in time, they're kind of back and forth. They don't know what to do. And we say, how about if you don't have to choose either of those right now? The death thing's really, really permanent. The life thing, with all the stuff you've got going on, seems really, really hard. If I could give you a third option, would you be interested? And they go, yeah, what is it? And the third option is dead simple. The third option is to stay safe for now. And that's all we ask them to do. can you stay safe for now whilst we look at all of this stuff together and start picking through it? And they go, yeah, all right. Then they pick how long they can stay safe for. So somebody might say, I can stay safe with this plan for a day. Someone else might say a week. Someone might go, I can stay safe with that plan for 6 months. And it buys that time to help them work on their problems, keeps them alive to work on their problems, essentially. Plants that little bit of hope. And each time we see them, so each time the SIW sees them, they redo that safety plan, they disable any suicide plans that they've come up with, they pick through all of that stuff that's going on again, they go right back to the start essentially, and then they say, with this plan that we have created together, how long can you stay safe? And they'll go, I can stay safe for 2 weeks with that now, and then you've got 2 weeks to work with them on those problems, and then you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again, until the person says, I'm not killing myself anymore. I've decided actually that I can see another way, and I've still got stuff I want to work on, don't get me wrong, it doesn't just go away, does it? But suicide's not for me anymore. And that's how it works. So I'm still talking, and I don't even know what question I'm answering anymore, but that's what the service is, and that was what the idea was. And obviously it's evolved loads over time, and it's evolved loads with need. We've expanded very rapidly. So we've got Wirral, Chester, Macclesfield and Crewe now, 26 members of staff that do those pieces of work. And we're 6 years on, 6 and a bit, and just over 41,500 suicide interventions that follow that exact process that I just spoke about. So something's working. Something's working, and we've spent the last couple of years really fine-tuning that so it's ready to be expanded and grow. The growth with Chester and Mac and Crewe came quicker than we thought, but you never say no to an opportunity, so we ran with that, and to get Wirral absolutely perfect so that it then becomes a blueprint to roll out to different areas. And I suppose the dream is to have them up and down the country. Amazing. And if someone said, do you want to put one on the moon, I'd say, yeah, when do I get on the rocket? Can you give us the money for it, please? But yeah, that's in a nutshell what it is.
I remember meeting you just before you were setting it up, and I just knew then for your drive and determination that this was going to be an success. You're one of those people that, you know, your determination comes out and it drives you. And
Thank you.
Honestly, it's incredible to hear how amazing you have. You know, and the life-saving work that you used to do. And so I suppose the important thing for us is if anyone's listening and they're thinking, what does that process look like if I need help and I go there? What would that look like?
So we're an over 16 service. We started as an 18 plus, but we saw very, very quickly there was a huge gap. We had people turning up in their school uniforms and they'd put their sister's date of birth and stuff like that. So we spoke to our insurance and we worked out what we had to do and made it a 16 plus service. So anyone over the age of 16, and the only criteria is that suicide's got to be a factor. So there has to have been some thoughts of suicide at some point. It doesn't matter if they were 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, and you don't want them to come back. That's still valid, right? That still counts. Or they can be absolutely at crisis point today, thinking about doing it today. We'll see. It doesn't matter, as long as suicide's a factor. And that includes if you're bereaved by suicide or if you support a loved one through crisis. So as long as suicide comes into your story, essentially, then you're more than welcome. So referrals go in on the website, they go in over the phone, you can walk in off the street, you'll be seen immediately if you're walking off the street. Everybody in the building is trained, so you might not see the person that you're going to end up with as your dedicated suicide intervention worker, but everybody from the top of the building to the bottom of the building is trained. So even if somebody works in finance or in events or whatever that looks like, everyone is trained to create that immediate safety whilst you kind of wait for your person. So even if you're walking off the street, the support will be there straight away. We're at 9:30, 4:30, 7 days a week. Then referrals can come from a loved one with your consent, and then they can come from a professional. So when I say professionals, our referral list is like 1 million pages long, because we take our biggest referral route is self-referral, so people that opt in and ask for help. The second one is the NHS, from our NHS partnership, with Cheshire Wirral Partnership. And then after that, it is every man and his dog. Sometimes we get referrals from the newspapers, when people have written into the newspaper in dire straits, and like anyone, GP surgeries, it doesn't matter. Quite frankly, I don't think swearing's okay on a podcast, is it? But quite frankly, I do not care where you have come from or how you got here. If you are here and you need help, there is somebody there to help you. And I think that's what it's about never having those barriers to access, never having those things, those kind of things that are put in your way. If you need help and you're at that point where you're saying, hey, can you help me? That's really, really hard. And that help should be there. It should be forthcoming, and it should be really timely and straight away. So all of our referrals are picked up within 24 hours. If you're walking through the front door, it's obviously immediate. But if you refer online or anything like that, it's 24 hours. So all we ask you to do is keep yourself safe for that 24 hours. If that's not doable, then you have to either turn up at the front door during our opening hours or present at A&E. So everything's picked up within 24 hours, and then a suicide intervention worker will call. On that first phone call, it's not just a phone call of, hey, we've got your referral, we're going to get you booked in. There's a safety plan done at that point. So there's always an intervention done straight away when somebody gets in touch. And then that's it, really. They'll start seeing a suicide intervention worker and they'll see them for as long as they need. So it's not like when you go for counselling. You know, when you go for counselling and you go every Tuesday at 5 o'clock. Well, if somebody says they can stay safe for 2 weeks, you don't need to see them every Tuesday at 5 o'clock. You're keeping them stuck in that place. But also, if someone says they can only stay safe for a day with the plan, then you need to see them every day or speak to them every day. So we work off of what that person says, what that client says. With this plan, I can stay safe for 1 day. Okay, let's do it again tomorrow. With this plan, I can stay safe for 3 weeks. Okay, let's do this in 3 weeks. And that's the way that we never have a waiting list, because they pick how long they can stay safe for. So the suicide intervention worker will work with them for as long as they need until they get to that point when they say, I don't want to kill myself anymore. I've still got XYZ that I want to work on, but I don't want to kill myself anymore. And then, because we weren't content enough, we weren't busy enough with what we were doing, we said, let's develop some in-house post-vention services as well. I think we've got 12 of those now. And when people come to us, they fill in a thing called a recovery star, and it's the 10 areas that are deemed crucial to wellbeing. You guys already know this stuff, but for listeners that don't, the 10 areas that are deemed crucial to wellbeing, and they mark them when they're at crisis point, so they can see at a snapshot the things in their life that they really want to work on, the things that are causing those extra stresses. So they might have marked low on work or on relationships. So when it comes to post-vention support, we can help tailor them and do a bespoke package of what that support looks like based on what they have kind of self-assessed at the start. So we've got the Recovery Star workshops, which follows those 10 key themes. We've got Man Cave, which is a male peer support group. Self-Care Movement, which is a female peer support group. Belong, which is an LGBTQIA+ peer support group. These all happened out of need, by the way. So as soon as a need arose, we created it. We've got the domestic abuse worker, Jules, because we saw so much of that during COVID that we were like, whoa, we've not got this as an in-house service, let's do it. And then a bereavement support group for those bereaved by suicide. Parent support group for parents supporting a child or an adult child through crisis, and I don't know what the rest are off the top of my head.
You can look on the website. There's a lot on there that's brilliant. Just obviously it's a men's mental health podcast, and Martin's Man Cave, that sounds fantastic when I looked at that. So it's a Sunday peer support group for men.
Yeah, pretty much. So we know there's loads of groups for men available. There's loads of amazing work going on, isn't there? And I think the more the merrier. Yeah. So we set ours up just after we set up MGP in 2019, and the men were saying we want a space that's our space, that we can do what we want with it. So when we expanded our building back in 2020 and we took those floors that were above the initial floor we took, it was a flat above. And the girl was going to leave anyway, but she might have left a little bit quicker because I went and prompted her to buy a house a bit quicker. Anyway, she left, and we were like, oh, what are we going to do with this? Like, are we going to get rid of the kitchen? We're going to get rid of, the bathroom. It's got a full bathroom in there, mainly because we can't afford to rip the bath out. But we kept the kitchen and stuff. And the lads love it because they've got a chef that comes in and teaches them how to cook, and that's something that came from them. Like, we say to them, what do you want to do? I'm not allowed to the Man Cave. I've never actually been. It's run by one of our suicide intervention workers, Steve, and they design what that looks like for them. And there are times where they say, we actually just want to sit around and have a chat and have a brew. And there's times where they say, right, we want the chef to come in and teach us something, or we want to go off and do this activity or whatever. And then that was when we ended up with self-care movement, because the ladies were like, this isn't fair. Why have we not got one like this? So they do theirs on a Saturday.
Amazing.
The lads do theirs on a Sunday.
Amazing.
And the LGBT one's on a different day, but I don't know what.
Again, go back to the website.
Yeah.
Obviously, the theme today is awareness, and you guys offer loads of training as well to raise awareness. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, brilliant. So to me, I mean, I'm training tomorrow morning, and I need to get myself out of podcast brain and into training brain, but I'm not going to go there yet. So I'm delivering tomorrow and Friday. We deliver a programme called Assist, which has come from Living Works in Canada, and that's actually the framework that the MGP model follows. That's where we got that from. It's all research backed and evidence based, which means we know it's really safe. And it teaches people how to spot the signs, ask the question, and then create a plan to keep somebody safe for now. So we felt it was really important that we delivered that training. We live and breathe by it. But we've got funding for family members where there's somebody being supported, so with somebody at risk. So quite often there'll be parents on that course, or partners, or friends, or whatever that looks like, and we put them through the training so they can create that extra layer of safety at home for when services might be closed, or when it might not be appropriate for services, or when it might not reach that threshold. So it's all about creating extra layers of safety wherever you go. And if you think you've created enough layers of safety, do another one just to be sure. So the Assist and the Safe Talk, which is like a miniature version of that. And the way I see it is you've got prevention, intervention and postvention. And we do pride ourselves in being a service that is prevention, intervention and postvention, because I think they're a circle and you've got to have them all together. And like postvention stuff is so important, what you do after somebody's been in crisis to stop them going back round to there. So that's right there with prevention, isn't it? And then the intervention stuff, that's the bit where the magic happens. And the prevention stuff, that's where you're talking about it, shouting about it, doing stuff like this, training people, educating people, changing that narrative, going down to Parliament in a ridiculous pink suit that was really not well thought through, just all that kind of stuff where you're banging that drum. But to me, they go in a circle. So the training stuff and the education stuff and the stuff we do in schools all sits in that prevention bracket for me. And the intervention stuff is that stuff you do when somebody does get to that point of crisis. The postvention stuff is what you do after that to stop them from going back round to that prevention point. And I just think that they coexist so beautifully together, and that you're not really solving a full problem unless you've got the whole thing. So that's why we said, let's do all three. If we're in for a penny and for a pound, why not? Amazing.
And in terms of events as well, I know you guys do so many different events and things and fundraising and things, but you have the Wirral Suicide Prevention Conference in May,
May. I want to say it's 16th or the 15th, or maybe it's on your notes. So we run events all year round because, quite frankly, we need to pay our bills, and because our demand goes up and up and up so quickly, you get the service fully funded, and by the time your funding's come through, it's not enough anymore to wash its own face because the demand goes up and up. So the Wirral Suicide Prevention Conference, nobody was doing a Wirral Suicide Prevention Conference, so I thought, we'll have that. We were going to do one anyway, but we'll have the title because no one else is doing one. And we do it every year, and we do it at Tranmere Rovers Football Club. And it's where we pull people from all across the country that are running amazing services or doing amazing things within statutory provision or within education, or just pulled from all different areas, really. And we get them all in a room, and we keep it really, really cheap. Cheap's not the right word, is it? Cost effective. Cost effective so that anybody can come. It's like 20 quid a ticket for a full day conference, and that includes lunch. So it doesn't make any money, it just washes its own face. But we keep it really low price so that anyone can come. And that means you have a mix of people in the room. So you have a lot of professionals in the room. Then you have a lot of people that are coming because they've lost somebody to suicide and they want to learn about it, or people that have said, do you know what, I think my company could be doing more about suicide prevention, I'm going to go and learn a little bit about it. And then you have people after that event that say, right, I've kind of, I'm into it now, what can I do, what can we do in our workplace or in our school or whatever. So it's a really nice mix of people in the room because everyone's there for genuine reasons. Nobody's just come because their employers said, hey, you've got to go to this conference, which is what I think you need in that suicide prevention world, isn't it? People that truly care and truly want to be there and truly want to hear it. So it's one of my favourite events of the year, and Darren and I actually take it in turns to host that. So I'm hosting this year. So there should be some comedy moments as well, because I get a microphone. And I've got to prance around with a microphone all day with a pair of shoes on, and I'm quite clumsy. So even if it's just for the comedy value, you should come for that.
Just the lineup alone, like, I've got to hear on my phone. The lineup is, the lineup, whatever. But the people you've got there, the guests, like, outstanding. And the ones that, we've used within the podcast as well, like, doing that. So. Yeah. Respect you.
It is a good lineup.
Yeah.
I'm not going to call any of them headliners because that would cause problems. But I have to say actually that none of them, we don't actually pay any of them to come because we don't have a budget for that. So they all come because they want to, and because they want to share the news of what they're up to and share all that information. And they're all amazing. And there's never a dry eye in there. We always get the lads from Wirral Grammar School for Boys in.
Oh, excellent.
And they come and they're one of our suicide safer schools. Yeah. We've done a big piece of work with them, but they have done a huge piece of work themselves as well. And they... Did you go there?
No, it's all interlinked.
The school.
We did their mental health fair last week. They're just amazing.
Good dealers. Oh, for you. Okay.
Yeah.
No,
good experience.
They're exceptional. Those boys.
Yeah.
Oh my god! I trained a couple of them. So they came to me and they said, and we'd done all this suicide safer school stuff with them. We trained up all their teachers. All the kids had all the assemblies. Amazing. All of year 10 had safe talk. Like, we'd done this really robust piece of work. And then 3 of the young lads came to me and they said, Jess, we really want to do the assist training for when we go off to university in case we have friends that are in crisis. And I was like, oh my gosh. So then they're like, we want to do it. It's £200 a head. We can't ask the school to pay for it. And I'm just like, oh, just take it. It's fine. And they were like, no, we don't want to just be given it. What jobs have you got around the building that we can do in exchange for our training? And I'm
these kids are amazing.
Sobbing. They're incredible. And they came and I said, well, SIW room 1 needs decorating. And they came in their overalls and they decorated. And then I trained them and they sat in that room. And it's heavy, like it's a heavy 2 days learning what to do when someone tells you that they're considering suicide. And they sat and they held their own. They were in a room full of people in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and you wouldn't have known. You absolutely wouldn't have known. They are exceptional.
If they are listening, we have promised that they can come on the podcast, so they will be future guests as well.
There you go. You can't not have them now.
Well, Ian's already said that they're definitely coming on.
We're blown away.
Articulate as well. All these fancy words, and I'm like, what's that word? Say it again, and how do I use it in a sentence?
That's a grammar school education.
Then again, whenever we went to the school and crew, that was it. And the students there were amazing. Yeah. We give them sometimes, they get this bad knock or whatever. Some of the young people, what they're going through, things is really, really hard. But some of them are just outstanding. You just got to listen to them.
Beings.
I went in to do, they asked me to go into Wirral Grammar before the boys went off to university, the year group that we'd done so much work with, and do kind of one last little look in the mirror with them about, okay, that you've been in this bubble of your school and your community, and you know what's in your community and you know what's here to keep you safe, but you're going to go off to university where it's going to be a new community, and here's what we want you to do. We want you to get there, we want you to research what's available for you or for a mate if you find yourself in that position. You're going to be going there, you're going to be drinking loads, you're going to be out of your routine. Things are going to feel a bit funny for a while, so get there and do before you go and have your 2-for-1 wickeds down at the SU bar or whatever they drink now. Do this bit of work. I know they're not going to, but do this bit of work and work out what's in your community for you and all of that. And they're just amazing, and they just sat there in this lecture hall, and they're all taller than me because I'm only 5'1.5". But they just sat there taking it in, and I was just dead proud of them all. It's a bit pathetic, isn't it?
No,
my eyes are too close to my bladder. Cry anything.
We said the same. We've been there twice in the last few weeks, and we were blown away. And a lot of the schools we're going into at the moment, they're blowing us away with how much they want to learn and be,
well, the kids aren't scared of the topic.
No,
I've noticed.
That's it.
So, we teach from year 7 upwards, and we went. That's when I went down to Parliament with the 3 dads walking. When they campaigned for that, and we got invited to this round table where we went and informed this education minister on how to do it safely and how to roll it out in the change into the RSHE curriculum now, not PSHE. And how to roll it out safely. And we gave kind of case studies of what we'd done. And we said, these kids are not scared of this conversation. These kids know about it from year 7 upwards. I'd argue younger, but that's a whole different conversation, isn't it? They're talking about suicide anyway, and some of them are actually doing it. So how about we get in there and we talk about it safely, and we teach them how to have those conversations safely. We're not asking them to carry the weight of their friends' thoughts of suicide, but we're asking them to know how to signpost, how to be open about it, how to get help for themselves if they need it. And the kids aren't scared of it at all. Go in with Beatrice the banana, which is another story for another day, but Beatrice the banana goes in, so it's really light-hearted, like as much as it can be. You get their attention with this ridiculous girl dressed up in a banana, and get them doing interactive stuff. It's not like when I was at school and they'd stand and kind of scare you with with different topics, and they all leave the room really upbeat, and they remember that time that a girl came dressed as a banana to their school and spoke to them about suicide. And it doesn't need to be any scary.
Can we get Beatrice the banana on the podcast soon, please? Is that right?
I've been with Beatrice this morning doing a promo film for our spring ball that's in June. And we've changed it from a winter ball to a spring ball. So we said, well, we need to put something out that makes people notice that we've moved the date, so they need to buy a ticket. And OLLIE, the clothing brand, have sponsored it. So I've been with Beatrice this morning as she ran through the OLLIE warehouse, and they threw dresses and things at her, and then drove off in a forklift truck. And no forklift trucks were harmed in the making of that film, because actually it was a man that did have a licence that then put on the banana costume to drive it. It wasn't Jodie that normally dresses as Beatrice.
No 2 days are the same, are they?
No, and then I said, I've got to do that in the morning, so I've got to be funny in the morning, and then I've got to get my articulate brain on. I've got to be articulate Annie in the afternoon for this podcast, and then I've got to go home and be a mum. So it's a lot of fun. Just brains just going in different directions.
Before we get massively interrupted by our fire alarm, the important thing, how can people follow you guys on social media? And if, for example, someone's listening and think, oh yeah, I want to do a bit of fundraising for you guys, how can they get involved?
Well, they're always welcome to fundraise. It costs us £80 to do a suicide intervention, which I think is really good value for money. So it means that when people fundraise, they can really quantify what difference that has made to the service, to some human beings with families, and within their local community. So they can get in touch via the website is absolutely fine, and speak to a guy called Sid for any fundraising. In terms of coming to us for help, please do. Even if you think, oh, is it that serious, or oh, do I need that? Well, why not? Let's get it early before it gets to that point where it's kind of life and death today. And I think that following us on social media, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. I think we might have a TikTok, but I don't even know how to get into that. I don't even know how to listen to a podcast, but I'm here recording one. And the way I see it is, if you're following us on social media and you never need us, great. But if you're following us on social media and you need us at some point, or someone in your network needs us, you know how to get to us easily, because at that moment in time when you've got loads going on, you might not have that energy to go trawling the internet for that information. So I would recommend that. I also think, if you think of your average friend list, so I think there's about 1,500 people on my Facebook friend list, because I'm 34, so I'm a Facebook person. But apparently, if you're in your 20s, you're an Instagram person, and if you're younger than that, you're a TikTok person, but let's use Facebook. So, you have 1,500 people on your Facebook, and we know statistically that 1 in 5 people are going to consider suicide at any point in their lives. So if you followed us on social media and potentially shared something that we've put out, and put a load of myth-busting things out, so it's not heavy, and you've shared something, and there might be someone on your following that needs that either now or in the future, and it's going to cost you nothing, so why would you not do it?
Amazing. That's such a good point. Last plug for the website.
Oh, it's the martingallierproject.org.
Amazing. And honestly, I'm blown away. The work you guys do is unbelievable, and people need to just, as I say, even if you're sharing, you don't know who you're going to help. What is it about these women who win the Merseyside Woman of the Year? It's we need to get you all together, like the Avengers.
Yes.
Blown away.
It's the
Absolutely
platform
incredible.
they give us. So when you win a Merseyside Woman of the Year, when I got mine in 2019, they put you in this limelight, in this platform where you've got no choice but to just absolutely smash it, because the whole world's looking at you now.
Honestly, every person we've had on was just blown away. Just unbelievable. Jess, thank you so much for joining us. And honestly, to take it back to Martin Gallier Project, we think you're all fantastic, and what you're doing is just unreal, and we'll forever be waving your flag and sharing what you do as well.
Thank
Amazing.
you. Really appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. And I don't know if I've waffled or if I've said anything inappropriate. So if I have, can you cut it out?
You're amazing.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you or anybody else you know is struggling with their mental health, visit hubofhope.co.uk or download the app today and find local and national mental health support.
So follow us on Instagram at The Man Hug Podcast.